Welcome to the Mayor Minutes podcast. I'm Joanna Mouton, Mayor of Wayzata, Minnesota, and your host. Tune in each month as we get to the heart and soul of the people who serve the city and the community. Today, I want to welcome John Berns. John started as a paid-on-call firefighter with the city in 2003 and has been serving the community for 20 years. John, thank you for being here.
I'm honored. Thank you, Mayor.
Now, before we get into it, you are a captain on the fire department as well.
That's correct, yes.
So when did you become a captain?
I don't honestly remember. It's been a few years.
Okay.
I started as lieutenant and then captain. So,
well, we'll talk a little bit more about what that role means within the fire department. But, you know, we have you here for a very specific reason, and that is we are here to recruit and people for the fire department who might be interested in becoming a volunteer firefighter. Tell us a little bit about what a volunteer firefighter means to the city of Wayzata.
Yes, and I'm very excited to talk about that. But before I do, I'm going to go off script just for a second.
Sure.
And thank you, Mayor, for your support for us in public safety, certainly for the police department and for the fire department. We have a lot of things going on. We're considering, I know the city's considering maybe a full-time chief position, but appreciate you specifically, your support for all of us in public safety. It really means a lot to us to know that we have the elected officials have our back. And also, I don't know if it's part of the script, but everybody should know that Mayor Mouton was a Wayzata firefighter, and we're proud that she was, and a great firefighter. In fact, we were talking about our locker number, because at the fire department, everyone gets assigned a locker, 1 through 31. And I'm locker number 6, and the mayor was also locker number 6.
I know, small world. Well, I'm glad you're here. Yeah. I'm glad we get to share the same number. It does mean something. It's kind of like on the police department, your badge number. You carry it with pride, and it's a representation of our role on the fire department, but our role also within the community, and we carry it with us forever. So thank you for your service, certainly. But let's talk a little bit.
I forgot your, I'm sorry, I forgot your first question.
No,
Maybe we should ask it again.
Yeah. So we are a paid-on-call volunteer department.
Yes.
That terminology is a bit of an oxymoron. Maybe we could talk a little bit about what paid-on-call volunteer means.
Yes. So in the old days, they probably were all volunteer firefighters, probably in Minnesota, and almost all the small communities, and even mid-sized communities. Cities as big as Plymouth, which is 80,000 people, Bloomington, which is probably 90,000 people, had paid-on-call departments.
And that's the trend actually around the country for most communities.
Yes. And some of those larger suburbs are moving to full-time. Obviously, Minneapolis and St. Paul have full-time firefighters, but a paid-on-call is a part-time city employee. So we train on a regular basis. We have to follow all other rules that city employees do, which is great. We have no problem with that. But we show up in addition to our scheduled time when our fire pager goes off.
Okay.
And that could be any time, 24 hours.
365.
365, yes.
Holidays, weekends.
Which is good. The people of Wayzata appreciate when they call 911, someone will be there as quick as we can.
Absolutely.
Yep. And that's how it works.
So how did you come to become a volunteer firefighter?
Yes.
Because you have a long history of public service that people who are listening may not know about.
Yeah. Thank you. So when I was a kid, I grew up in southeast Iowa, and then later we moved to La Crosse, Wisconsin area. But I saw my dad do the same thing. I didn't even know if he got paid or not. He may have been a true volunteer, but he was a volunteer firefighter for many years, eventually became the fire chief in West Point, Iowa.
Oh, fantastic.
So I thought, well, when I get someplace and settle in, if they have a department, I would certainly look at joining. And I moved to Wayzata in May of 2003, And within a matter of weeks, the previous fire chief, Paul Klaprock, who was my neighbor, walked over when I was mowing the lawn and said, "Hey, have you thought about joining the department?" And that was the invitation I needed, and went straight from there.
That's fantastic. Now, little known fact, you also served on the city council.
Yes.
When did that occur?
Yes, similar, because I was elected to the city council in 2004. It was also a funny thing. My dad was also a city council person back home, and he became the mayor too eventually.
Oh, you're kidding.
But so there was city council and fire department were two things I was going to try when I got settled, and I did. And my family loves Wayzata. We're very fortunate to be part of this wonderful community, and happy to give back, as so many people are on the city staff, on the fire department certainly, and then the elected officials, the council, and all the commission members.
Absolutely. And then you moved on from city council. You became a state rep as well.
Yes. I was very, very fortunate to get a chance to serve in the Minnesota House of Representatives, and proud to serve Wayzata and 13 other communities around Lake Minnetonka.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, again, Thank you so much for all of your years of service in so many different capacities. Now, as the fire department looks to recruit new individuals, can you talk a little bit about what some of the key qualifications are for someone who is interested in joining?
Yes. And first I want to say thank you for talking about this today. Thank the city for focusing on it, and thank Liv for helping publicize this, because like any group, organization, company, business, nonprofit, we need good people. And we need specifically good people who live within 10 minutes of the Wayzata Fire Station. That's one of the requirements, because we're a volunteer or paid on call department. So when the pager goes off, we need people to be at the station as quick as they can to respond to a call. We also have usually a duty officer who's on 24/7 and ready to go immediately as well. But it's very important we get good people. And so when I look at that, there's kind of the overriding is we want someone who wants to be a firefighter. And there's kind of two things that I think about. One is you have to be willing to put in the time. And there is some time commitment. It's clearly not a full-time job.
Right.
It's clearly not. But we train on Monday nights, usually at 7 o'clock, sometimes earlier, and we need you to have your Monday nights free. That's really, really important. You just can't do it if you're not trained.
Sure.
And then you have to also be willing to come in to those calls. Now, there's minimum requirements for number of training on Monday night you need to be at, and a percentage of fire calls you need to be at. But if you just come in and you're just hitting the minimums, you're probably not doing yourself fair, because you're not trained enough. You're not an expert at what we need to do. So we want people to go above the minimums, certainly, if they can. But we also have flexibility because people have families.
Sure.
And as through my time as a firefighter, I have 5 children. They're busy. I coached a bunch of baseball and basketball, and even a couple of seasons of football. And so I was busy, still am, but I was able to make it work. So, but you have to want to be here, and you have to want to train. And the second thing I'd say about what makes a good or great firefighter is someone who really appreciates teamwork. Because as you know, we don't go to a fire with one person.
Right.
You take a truck, usually if it's in Wayzata, we're taking multiple trucks, full of firefighters, we have to work together. And you don't need to be an expert in every single thing outside of the fire department, but we have electricians, we have financial people, we have people who work in the construction trades. We have people who work for insurance companies. We have a wide variety of people, and each one of those skills can be extremely useful either on a fire ground or sometimes running the fire department. Like we have a very, very smart person who heads our relief association, which kind of manages retirement for the firefighters, which is also something maybe we should talk about.
Yeah.
But is an expert, like a Wall Street guy who really helps us and helps the city and helps manage our money.
That's fantastic. So I want to talk a little bit about the teamwork and the training. And for me, one of the things that I appreciated most when I was on the department was that we all had a similar amount of training, which when you're working as a team, especially in high stress, physically demanding type of roles, you want people who can dedicate that time to the training so that you are all on the same page and understand what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done, or and to keep people safe. I mean, that's ultimately, we want everybody going home safely at the end of a fire call. And if we don't prescribe the requisite amount of training, that puts not only an individual firefighter at risk, but the team at risk, and then the community ultimately. So talk a little bit about some of the minimum qualifications in terms of training that a firefighter needs.
Yes. And I really appreciate the fact that you've been there. When the pager goes off, sometimes it's a really high stress thing, and training is what helps you get through it.
Sure.
So it's there's two parts of it. The first part is we have, I'd say, classroom training, although it's not really classroom, it's hands-on stuff. But when I went through, I drove up to Anoka Tech to do mine.
Sure.
And now we've gotten better where we have that same instructor come to our station.
Nice.
And sometimes we share a class with neighboring departments, all the new recruits. And the classes you take through tech are Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2. And you also need to take an EMR or medical training class.
Sure.
Some people have an EMT, which is above EMR, but it's not required for this city. So that would work too. Some people could actually come in with their training done, which is great.
From another department?
Or some folks just want to be a firefighter and go and get the training on their own.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
And those are, I think, the Anoka Tech, it was like a 4-credit class. It was like, I think mine, when I did it, was 6 through 10, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we always went till 10 o'clock, sometimes 11 o'clock.
Sure.
There's a lot of stuff you need to go through. It's how to do basic operations on a fireground, how to operate a hose, how to climb a ladder, how to use your SCBA, which is your air pack, and including there's live training or live burns is what they call them, where you actually practice putting out a fire. And really, for a regular person, a really scary thing. You're in a really dark, super hot room, and there's fire in there, and you're there. It could be 300, 400 degrees in there, and you got to put it out. But you get trained to do it.
I'm smiling because those were the fun training exercises, right? I mean,
sure,
that's what we were looking for. I was like, oh, it's a live burn.
Yeah, exactly. That's, there's a lot of things that make up a firefighter, but there's a certain percent of of a firefighter's DNA likes that fun stuff.
Sure.
Especially training. Now, we don't like to go to someone's house on fire.
Absolutely. Because
it's an awful day for that family, but we like to be the one to go there and put it out.
Absolutely.
On the nozzle. And then there's you got to learn your ropes. There's other kind of not as fun stuff. You got to learn, building construction and how that affects fire. There's some classroom stuff as part of Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2 courses. But that's really important that you learn that. And you don't have to walk in day one with that. If you do, that's great. The city of Wayzata and the fire department will pay for you to go through that training.
That's great.
And it really gets you up to speed. And the second part of the training is kind of the on the job. It's every Monday. And we cover a lot of stuff. We review the stuff in Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2, but we do all kinds of new stuff. We train on our equipment, our trucks, our fireboat.
And part of that, as I remember, is also there's a lot of equipment. There are a lot of hand tools. There's a lot of motorized equipment. And you have to understand how that equipment works and where it is, depending on what truck is going out the door, so that you're not fiddling around trying to find it. So sometimes it's just the basic things, right? Just like where your silverware is in your kitchen drawer, where a pike pole is when you get off a truck or a chainsaw, and then you know how to use it, and that it's operational when you need it. So that's great. So that's once someone is hired. What about the application process and the interview process? Can you walk me through a little bit what that looks like?
Yes. So I'm not an expert on this, so maybe Liv or maybe we can get someone else to put on the screen what the actual steps are. We have an application you have to file. There is an interview. At some point, there's a background check. I know we do the background check after I think we're ready to make an offer because we don't want that to influence us. We want to hire good people, and that's also state law. But there is a background check. There's a physical agility test, which is doing a number of tasks, firefighter tasks, climbing our ladder truck, raising and lowering a ladder, operating a hose. So we can make sure you can do the job physically.
Wear a nice CBA as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Actually, there's a course where you have to crawl on your hands and knees with the air pack on. I do not believe you have to be on air for that.
Gotcha.
But you have to be able to, have the thing on your back, which is, heavy. But
Right.
I've never seen anyone fail that test.
Okay.
And I've, as one of the officers, administered it numerous times.
Sure.
And there's also a medical check. We want to make sure you're physically healthy enough to do the job as well.
Because it is a very physically demanding job.
Yes.
And so the equipment, I remember there was a number thrown around. So the bunker gear, the helmet, the SCBA tank, when you were fully decked out in your gear back in the day, and I think there are composite materials now, they're maybe a little bit lighter, was around 70 to 75 pounds. Where are we at today in terms of weight, generally speaking?
Yes.
Is it still around the
I
same
think it's
number?
around that number, yes.
Okay, so it hasn't went
Our
up
air
too much.
tanks went from metal to composite, so we probably lost a little weight there, but we're probably carrying more stuff, so it's
Sure.
a wash. But so yes, you when you're going into a fire, you're wearing you're wearing like a snow pants, winter jacket, face mask, and a heavy air tank, like it's a big heavy backpack on. So
Absolutely. And many times in the middle of July and
yes,
August.
yes,
Which is,
sometimes
it's
those are not
challenging.
the fun fires to fight, but
Exactly.
we'll
we do that anyway.
yeah.
I
yes.
say we. I don't do that anymore.
Well, you used
but
to. Yeah.
Used to, yeah. So candidate wants to apply. They go through the process. Is there then a group of officers, or who makes up, typically speaking, the interview board?
Things have changed a little bit. We used to have kind of a bylaw, how we govern our department. Now we have policies and procedures. And I believe one carryover from those was an interview committee. So
Okay.
the fire chief appoints a number of folks. There's also someone from City Hall, I think from the HR department, who sits on. And there used to be a community member who was part of the Crime Prevention Coalition that was also on the board.
Nice.
Or in the interview committee. And so there's an interview and they make a recommendation to the chief. And then the chief, we have to go through the whole process.
Sure.
But usually the officers are not part of that.
Okay.
We can be. And the one thing I would tell someone who's interested is first say yes to looking into this. It's easy for everybody to say no. And if everyone in the city said no, we wouldn't have a fire department.
That's right.
So say yes to the process, but at the same time, make sure you have all your questions answered before you get into it. And I would strongly, strongly encourage any potential applicant to reach out to me or to the fire chief or to anyone on the department and understand, because it is a commitment and we really want people to come for 10 years or 20 years if they can, or 5 if or even 4 or 3. 6-month firefighters aren't great for anybody. It's not great for the applicant.
Sure.
It's not great for the city because it's really expensive to train folks. And it wasn't a good fit there probably. And sometimes people move away. We understand that.
Absolutely.
You have to be within 10 minutes of the station. So
And that's a 10-minute drive.
yes.
Living. What about, so if someone works within 10 minutes of the city and can respond, does that qualify?
Yes, there is the ability to, if you're here 40 hours a week, and you can leave your job to go to a fire call, especially during the day. That's the time when we don't have as many firefighters responding
Sure.
because they're a lot of times working out of town and they can't make it, or they're more than sometimes 30 minutes away, so they would never make a fire call even if they wanted to, because we
Right.
need to be here right away. So that is an option, and we've had those folks before. It's certainly harder, but if people are going to be committed and they're going to show up and serve the city and make it to the fire calls, we absolutely would want those folks to apply.
Absolutely. There was another question. It escapes me at the moment, but I'm sure it's going to be right there for me. So we talked about the classroom training. We talked about the Monday night training, some of the assessments that are done in-house. What's the minimum age?
I think it's 18. I think it's 18.
Okay. So all those 18-year-olds,
Yep.
they should be thinking about a career, because we have had firefighters who've joined at 18, 19, 20 years old and have been on the department 30, 40, 50 years.
Absolutely. Yep.
And multi-generational too, which is amazing. You know, the other thing that I would say, and you can tell me, John, if you agree, another really important facet to a good firefighter is an understanding family. And a supportive family.
Yes.
It is incredibly rewarding, but it can be challenging. Like you said, Monday nights away at training. You're spending the first, a good part of a year also in classroom training for Firefighter 1, 2, and EMR. And then you've got the inevitable calls that happen in the middle of the night during a birthday party, holiday celebration. So you need a family that understands as well. And so would you agree that it's really important not only to meet with the fire department personnel to get information, but also maybe have your significant other come and speak to other spouses, partners, or fire department personnel who might be able to provide some additional insight of what the expectations are of them as well. Because we also have community events where our fire department's very actively involved in those. So that takes away that precious time away from family, but it is serving in a different way.
Yeah. And I want to come back. I want to tell a little story about, what it means to be a firefighter and sometimes miss stuff, but I'll come back to that. In terms of significant other, spouse, involvement, strongly recommend it. My wife was very supportive and, but also sacrificed, as did everyone in our family. And just get your question, say, what is this really going to mean to me? And I really like the idea of talking to another spouse, or certainly talking to a firefighter. I think we'll be honest with everybody, because we don't want someone coming in to a situation that's not going to work out.
Right.
We really strongly want more firefighters, very much so. But it doesn't make sense to get someone into a place that's not a good fit. So we can kind of talk you through and prepare you, and then that applicant can make the decision. Yes, I'm willing to make this sacrifice because it's for the greater good. It's for my community. And it helps me. And also, it may be a behavior I want to be a role model for my kids. Absolutely. To show, yes, people should serve in roles like this. So, and one specific example, and I have a number of these. There's at least 2 calls I was at on Christmas Eve. One was a house fire, one was a medical. And, my wife took the time to make this wonderful prime rib dinner, everything in it. And I missed the whole dinner. But what I was doing was responding to a heart attack. And we worked on this patient, and I was the one who was riding in the back of the ambulance, breathing for her to the hospital. And she lived. And that was something I was proud of. Now, is it me that I'm proud of? Not necessarily. Any person on my department would have done that.
Sure. And
would have done a good job. Any firefighter in the state of Minnesota would have done that. I happened to be the person that was on the truck that day, and I did it. So you do miss out on some things. And there's other examples too. So you have to understand going into that, this is what we're going to do. And if you have a spouse or significant other, then you decide as a team that that's what you want to do.
Absolutely.
And that's the ethos at the department. If you look at our sign outside, it says when people have an anniversary, 10 years, 20 years, 2 years, they usually thank the firefighter and the partner.
Yes.
Because it is really the family unit, if there is a family unit, that is supportive of anyone coming up to the station.
And I think another thing that shouldn't be ignored is we've had fathers and sons, we've had
Correct.
brothers, we've had husbands and wives. So it really is a family, not just within the department, but sometimes literal blood relatives that are joining together or serving at the same time. So I think that's really special because that doesn't happen in very many of our departments.
No, it is. I mean, I'm obviously a son of a firefighter, and who knows what my children will do, but I would certainly encourage them if they are interested to look at that. It's really a special job. It's not like any other part-time city job. No offense to everyone else, because we work with the other city employees, and they're the best of the best here.
Yeah.
But it's really a different thing to be a volunteer firefighter. And the nice thing is, especially if you live in town or you live real close, you can be walking around your community at the art experience or at JJ Hill Days, and know that in the community you're in, if something happens, you will be there to help your neighbors. And that's a little different than professional firefighters who don't always live in the communities they serve. So it certainly brings you tighter to your community, your home, and care more about that. And I think we need that in the world, just people to be more closely aligned with their community.
Absolutely. It all starts at home, right? And and Wayzata is our home. Some of the fondest memories I have were some of the most challenging calls I ever responded to. So similarly, you miss a Christmas dinner. I missed my nephew's baptism when we were at a church fire. And I think about also some situations, some are clearly devastating to the people who are subject to what is happening. And, it's interesting if people want to serve, like truly selflessly serve, there is nothing better than this line of work where you are with people and supporting people, sometimes saving their lives or even just comforting them in the most frightening situations they've ever faced. And there was a car accident on the highway that we responded to, and it was truly devastating. And we do our job, and the call ends, and we all go home. And then weeks later, I remember going to the fire station to pick something up, and the chief hands me a letter. And I'm like, okay. And so I open it up, and it was one of the people that was in this car, and just expressing her gratitude for being there to speak to her, to hold her hand. There were much more qualified medically trained professionals that were there for her in that instance, but she needed a different skill set. And that was the skill set I brought to that call in that moment. And just receiving that letter was so impactful. That I knew she was okay, because sometimes we also don't know how things, turn out for folks. But to have that gratitude and know that there was a positive impact in this person's life in such a challenging time was one of the most fulfilling. I mean, that is almost 25 years ago. And I still think about it, and it still warms my heart that I could do that for someone in this community.
Yeah. That's just a wonderful story. And it's obviously a reflection on you and your ability to step up and serve, and probably didn't know when you signed up that would happen someday. You're just going to there, serve the community, do your job, get trained. But it's also a story that I think anybody who's a potential applicant should think about, because that's not why we do it. We don't do it for our pay, which is not less than our neighboring departments. Sure. And it's not a lot, but that's not why we're here. And there's one firefighter who's been on a while who says, he got a paycheck, his first paycheck, and he says, I didn't even realize we got paid. I was just up here to do the job. Yeah. So, but that is important. And that level of, connection to your community and to other people, the patients you serve, sometimes the homeowners that we help out on fire calls, that is something that is extremely rewarding. And you talk about the challenges and the rewards. That's a rewarding thing. And it's something that you just don't get in most jobs. Yeah. But you're also, a lot of jobs you're not in the high stress situation either. So there's a trade-off.
Absolutely.
But I think anyone at the station, including, I think you would say this, will gladly make that trade-off.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do it again if I could, but
yeah,
I've handed that over.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you talked about retirement a little bit. Let's talk about that, because there is a modicum of pay that's associated with being a paid on-call volunteer.
Yep.
You're not going to pay the rent with it, but it is a small amount. Talk about the retirement a little bit, of how that's structured, when people qualify. How does that work?
Yeah. Currently we have a vesting system. So there's a lump sum retirement. You get, I think you have to be at least 55 to collect it, but most people wait. You have to have 20 years to get fully vested, 10 years to get 50% vested.
Okay.
And so what that means is 10 years of meeting all the minimum requirements of being a firefighter. And then you're able to get retirement. And it's not a huge amount, but it's certainly, I think it's more, it's a bigger deal than the pay.
Sure.
And it also, it's structured that way because we want a 10-year firefighter is going to be better than a 6-month firefighter because they've been doing it long enough and they understand the job. So there's an incentive there to keep people. I know in both the pay and the retirement, I believe the city's looking at potentially increasing that because we have to be competitive with our neighboring departments. I think and I couldn't give you a number because it's not a set number. It's a defined contribution instead of a defined benefit plan.
Right.
So
yeah, and that's partially dictated by the state, and so we have some parameters that we have to abide by.
Yes.
So we got kind of the administrative stuff out of the way and a couple good stories. Now I'm going to put you on the spot. Tell me, so go back in your memory bank for the last 20 years. What was the strangest call you've ever been on?
Boy. There's been a lot of calls. And I'm blanking right now. I'll keep thinking because I'll come up with something.
How about the most difficult call you've ever been on?
Yeah, I mean the difficult calls obviously are medical calls,
sure,
especially involving kids. And somebody needs to go to those calls, so we go to them. The police officer go to them, and paramedics go to them, and it affects everybody. But there are not a lot of those. I'd say maybe 10% of our calls are medical calls. The others are everything else. And you can probably read on the website the variety of things we do. We go to water incidents. We go to wires down during storms. We go to hazardous materials. We go to fires, cars, apartments, houses. Gas leaks, car accidents, use the jaws of life to cut people out. And I'm now remembering one of the weirdest calls we got. Not the weirdest, but one unusual one, which was there's a 911 call from someone who lived on the lake.
Okay.
And they called in to say that a cruise ship was sinking on Lake Minnetonka.
A cruise ship. And
what they meant was like one of the Al and Alma's boats.
Okay.
And so we, as quick as we can, got out there, got in the boat, and we have a fireboat in the bay, so we just have to lower it from its and take off. And we found the cruise ship, and they waved at us, and they say, "There's nothing wrong here, guys. You can go home." So that's you occasionally get calls like that. That person, I'm sure, meant well, but there was no cruise ship sinking in Lake Minnetonka.
There was no Royal Caribbean, with a water slide coming down into the lake. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to think of I remember some of the most difficult were fully involved house fires, middle of summer.
Yeah.
Exhausting. I mean, we're talking like 10, 15 minutes at a time. And then probably some apartment fires. Because that's the other thing that the department does is they provide mutual aid.
Correct.
So they help other communities when there's a need for personnel. So what are some of the communities that we help support in that way? Yes,
and that's the way the fire system works across the country, especially in Minnesota. Because usually one department, except maybe Minneapolis, but any other even big department, Plymouth, Minnetonka, they don't have enough firefighters at the station on duty to put out an apartment fire, and maybe even not a big house fire. So what works... and this is very common anytime there's a large fire, even a decent-sized house fire, they call mutual aid. So all of our neighbors we have on set, they're called box alarms. So if we get a structure fire, Could be Minnetonka, could be Plymouth, could be Long Lake, could be Excelsior would come to help us. And a lot of times more than one of those departments if it's big. You can easily get 50 to 70 firefighters at a large structure fire, apartment fire.
Absolutely. And then the other great thing is, I mean, there's also then in such an unfortunate situation, but then you have supporting agencies that are also there or nonprofits like the Red Cross. And there are all of these mechanisms in place to help those folks beyond, it's not just the fire service coming in, putting out a fire, and then everybody's standing out in the street in the middle of January. But there are all of these mechanisms to bring in support for these individuals who've effectively lost their home and their belongings. So it is just an amazing system of how that all works and how quickly it comes together in these tough times.
Yeah.
So how many firefighters are we potentially looking for, John?
Well, I think we may officially be capped at 30. I'm not sure if that cap is still in place because that was a bylaw thing.
Okay.
But we're in the 20s right now, so we could easily hire 10 people. I don't think we've ever had a class of 10 new people, but if there's 10 wonderful firefighters, I'm sure the fire chief will find a way to get everybody a locker and get them on board. Maybe one other thing I wanted to mention, I don't know if we're getting close to the end, but we kind of talked about the rewards.
Yeah.
One of the things that's important to understand is we're really team oriented at the department. And so that means it's fun to do the fun stuff and the really important stuff. It's fun. I've cut a roof off a car, cut a door off before. All that stuff's, using your skills and training, and you're making a real difference. But we also at the fire department have to wash trucks, and we have to sweep the floor, and everybody contributes. It doesn't matter if how big your house is in the city of Minnetonka or Wayzata or Plymouth or wherever you live. Everybody's equal at the fire station, and that's really important. And that really builds the team. And everyone has to be willing to chip in. Sometimes it's not fun to lay out hose, but it's something we have to do. It's more fun to, cut a hole in the roof with a chainsaw, right? But we all have to be in for everything. So that's one of the things I want people to understand is just, come on board and jump right in. There's a lot of people at the station who will mentor you, who will help you. And you don't need to know this stuff going in. You don't need to know how to operate a chainsaw or to drive a fire truck. It usually takes a few years anyway before firefighters become drivers of our apparatus. But it's a desire to learn. It's a desire to be a good teammate. It's a desire to show up, sometimes in the middle of the night. It's a desire to show up on Monday and then, be open.
Absolutely.
And we'll help you. We'll mentor you. We'll someone who's never done it within a year can be a great firefighter. It can have so much fun and contribute.
And it's about that commitment, right? And I think that that's what really makes a phenomenal firefighter is, you put everything else to the side. When you're a firefighter, that's your job. And it's, I'm smirking a little bit because when you said laying out hose, I'm like, well, that hasn't changed in 20 years. It's still like the one thing I absolutely hated doing, but you do it and you enjoy it. And I'm just going to say, I mean, we've had men and women of all ages. I mean, even folks post-retirement in their day-to-day life who've joined. And so I would hate for anybody to think that, I'm not terribly big. I'm 5'5", I think, at the time, maybe 125 pounds. But if you're committed to the process, you learn, you adapt, you have people that help you. And that is absolutely unequivocally true, is that people will mentor you through the process. And there's nothing better. I mean, a book can only teach you so much, but it's when you're out on the ground learning, the first fire call and your knees are knocking together because you're so scared. And then by the end of it, you just hop on the truck and are like, okay, we'll be there soon enough. And, so it's fun to see an individual evolve in that role too. And so I hope that we get, 10 applicants that are all absolutely phenomenal and want to move forward. John, talk a little bit about if you don't mind, where they can get an application, who they should call if they have questions, and is there a deadline for the application?
Yes. And I believe our deadline is June 30th. Yeah. I think the place I would go to is the City of Wayzata website, which is wayzata.org, and go into Fire Department. And there's a number of videos, including some really good videos shot a few years ago with firefighters talking about what the job is, and that'll really help you understand what the job is like. Take time to call the fire chief. You don't have to. That's not part of that. It's not a requirement. And I think the link is online as well to the application. But reach out to the fire chief. I'm sure he'd be happy to talk to you. Reach out to me. My email is jberns@wayzata.org, and maybe put that on the screen. But I'd be happy to talk to anybody about it.
Great.
And we can get you with someone else. If you don't want to talk to me, we have brand new firefighters who can tell you what it's like. They just went through the training. We can get you in contact with a significant other or a spouse, so they can talk to. But it's just learn about it, and then for a bunch of people listening to this, hopefully it'll be like, I kind of always wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And it was never the right time. And if it is now the right time, then pursue it. And we'll meet you halfway, and we'll get something going. And love to have new people every year on the department.
That's fantastic. Well, Captain Berns, John,
Yep.
Thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. Thank you for doing my number justice. It is nice to see someone that I respect so highly wearing it as well. And, again, you have put in so much time and effort in so many capacities for the city. Thank you. Thank you for all you've done and what you continue to do. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Obviously, I want to say the same thing back. I've said this before. I'll continue to say it. Thank you for your service. There was a time when I was both a firefighter and a city council member. The harder job was city council member. They didn't have to go into fire, but it was a harder job. And I'll admit that the guys at the department won't like me saying that,
No, probably not.
And I enjoyed them both. And obviously I've been able to continue now for 20 years. Will be August 1st, I think, for me. And I don't plan on going away anytime soon.
Good for you. Well, great. Well, thanks again. Thanks for being here. Give my best to everyone on the department. And we look forward to getting a lot new applications.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this month's episode of the Mayor Minutes podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite listening app so you don't miss an episode. You can listen to the latest episode and find links to available streaming platforms at wayzata.org/mayorminutes or stream the video recording on YouTube.